Adam, welcome back to another episode of Building Your Authority.
Joe Bardavia, great to be with you once again.
There it is. We can't do a show without that, Adam. So I appreciate you continuing your efforts to try to be a radio personality, which I told you, it doesn't pay well. So you picked the right career move, I'm telling you, Adam.
No, it's a career ambition. I want to be that radio disc jockey in New York City, just like you, Joe.
Nah, you don't need that in your life. So in past episodes, Adam, as you know, we've talked about building your authority. Episode 1 was a deep dive into, the what, who, and what, and why could be an authority. Episode 2, we covered Amazon. And now we're going to talk about authority in action. And this gentleman who's going to join us today, Adam, he's got the receipts. You know how the kids ask for your receipts? This guy is the epitome of authority in action. Verne Harnish.
Yeah, so this is going to be a lot of fun. Verne is a dear friend. Verne is a mentor, somebody that I have learned so much from over the last 15 years, and probably few better examples of using authority to really single-handedly build a business empire. And we're going to walk through the stages of that and kind of walk behind the curtain, and Verne's going to share how he's done that, and very, very interesting story and a lot of actionable insights that I think our listeners can learn from and implement some of those things in their own business.
Yeah, and for the uninitiated, Verne is an entrepreneurial icon. He's renowned globally as the growth guy. He's the founder of Entrepreneurs Organization and Scaling Up. So without further ado, Verne, welcome to Build Your Authority.
Joe, wonderful to be here. Adam, it's always great to be with you.
Well, and let's not forget the most important part of Verne's byline is multi-book author, Forbes Books author of multiple best-selling books, almost 1 million copies sold cumulatively between the titles. And how many different languages, Verne, have your books been translated into?
We're in 26 languages.
26 languages. So talk about authority.
Yeah, and speaking of that authority, Verne, let's start with the steps you took to become an authority. Like, what was your business? What did you do during the first part of your career that you're like, I've achieved so much in my career that now I want to help the next generation of leaders, the people that are out there. So what led you to walk through the doors of Advantage Forbes Books? But tell us about that early part of your career.
Well, as you know, it's content that's king or queen. And there was a lot of stuff written about startups. There's, today an incubator on every corner. I've got an MBA, which is supposed to teach you how to, run a grown-up company. But there really wasn't the parenting manual for what it took to really scale. And so after founding YEO, I launched an executive program with MIT and Inc. magazine. Still run it today. They still let the old man teach in it, called today EMP. And between 91 and 2001, first, to become an authority, I think you've got to figure out what is the content. What are the things you want to be the authority about? So I had a chance to move about 1,000 entrepreneurs through that program, brought in about 40 thought leaders, and out of that really created the content that ultimately led to my first book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And so I think the first thing you got to do if you want to be an authority is put in the 10,000 hours that's required, I think, in order to be able to somewhat, I don't know that I deserve it, but that allows you then to step out and have some things to say.
Verne, I think you just let down so many of our listeners because you said the one thing that many people don't want to hear, which is you have to put in the hard work. Yeah. And that's something that Joe and I have talked about previously, that at the end of the day, you can intentionally, strategically build your authority, but if you don't have true expertise on your topic, then none of it matters. And so maybe talk for a minute just about how you built that expertise for the topic, which of course is really helping entrepreneurs scale up their business, specifically, which I want you to talk about later, scaling up valuation of your business. But give us a bit just of the origin story of how you actually got those 10,000 hours so you could write a book on the topic.
Yeah. Well, I first got started with a company called Career Track. So I was one of their contract speakers at them. Jimmy Colano's company, who became one of my founding board members of YEO. And literally, there were a group of us that put in 200 days a year going around the world leading one-day workshops. And so you really get familiar with your content and the audience. But, who we're here to talk to are business owners. And I think what business owners fail to recognize that if you've been in business 5, 10, 25 years, you really have a built-in expertise. You already have what Bob Bloom called the inside advantage. Now it's time for you to sit down and really codify that and get it succinctly stated. We were talking just with a group we have here at the boot camp, the 2-day boot camp that you guys provide to really allow these entrepreneurs to get the assets, the content assets they need to be an authority. And how important it is that just the chapter titles allow you to create some new language that you can make unique within your industry. So I want you to realize that if you're listening to this and you've been in business for a few years, you have already put in the 10,000 hours. Now it's time for you to get in a room. And as you guys know, you guys make it easy then to figure out how to get that content organized so you can get it communicated out to the market. And as you know, nobody wants to be sold. They want to be educated. And that's why I've talked to you about it. I mean, the biggest mistake I made is I should have written a book 10 years before. I'd already been in business building companies for 15 years. And that could have been codified much sooner. So the fact that I waited, I think, was the biggest mistake.
Joe, one of the things we talk about in The Authority Advantage, and it's on the back cover in bold print because it's that important, is this idea of, are you a thought leader with something to teach, or are you an operator with something to sell? And Verne makes such a great point that people don't want to be sold, but they do want to be educated to make better decisions for their business, for their family, for their personal life. And so for entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business leaders, most listening that probably have well more than those 10,000 hours, they've got the expertise.
They do.
Now it's just a matter of taking that expertise and organizing it in a way where you can create and share content that can help people.
Yeah. And one of the things I think if you are part of your own trade organization, and we encourage every business owner to really dig into their trade events. If you have a book, then all of a sudden you're invited to speak. You're invited to do, if nothing else, breakout sessions, which really gives you a much broader presence within your industry. And as you know, the ultimate key to scaling is through influencers. If you've got the right reference clients, and your authority really allows you to garner that attention. And so first start by owning the ink in your industry and having relationships with your top trade association folks so you can get on stage.
Yeah. Verne, one of the things that you have talked about for many, many years is this idea of owning a word or owning a phrase.
Yeah.
Right. And you have provided so many great examples of iconic companies that nailed that.
Yeah.
And these are companies that we all know the name of. And if we say the word or we say the phrase, we can immediately name the company. But you think that's really important for small and mid-market businesses too.
Yeah.
And tying into your book and your core message, maybe share some of that with our listeners, because I think that is so valuable and really nobody talks about it.
Yeah. Well, let's go back and get very kind of fundamental. The number one job of the owner of a business, if you're listening to this and you own a company, is to drive valuation. And your number one then decision is who's going to be the CEO. Now, some of you wear both hats, and some of you might decide that you should fire yourself. And in fact, you want to kind of extract yourself anyway. Now, why do I say that? Because the number one job of the CEO is strategy. And so what does strategy mean? And it comes back to the most important strategy question I ever thought was discovered. It was popularized by the late Clay Christensen at Harvard. And that is a very clear understanding: what is the job your product or service does for a customer? And I want to come back to that, but let's start with the end result. You know you have brand. You know that your customer understands the job you can do for them if they're calling you instead of you having to call them. That is, let's get real fundamental about it. The fundamental reason you want to have authority in your industry, and people to understand what is the authority you have. It's not general, it's very niche. The riches are in the niches. Is that people are calling you because they've determined you are the best at what it is they need. And so if the phone is not ringing off the hook, then this is where authority can be helpful. Now, that means then we got to answer the job to be done. And so for us, we figured out my original name of the company, Gazelles, was dumb. Nobody could even spell it, the whole bit. So we got clear. Our job is to help you scaling up. And we got even more clarity around particularly scaling up the valuation of the business. And if that matters to you, then give us a phone call. You guys know the popular examples. Google, it's search. If I need to search for something, and Google got into all kinds of other crazy businesses. They had to stick it under a new brand, Alphabet. But last year, they determined, you know what? $2 trillion of our $2 trillion valuation has been tied to one thing: search. And our next trillion is going to be tied to search. Now, they said they're going to replace search. They got to get into the AI business, but they got distracted and lost sight of the job we most needed them to do. And now we're going to ChatGPT in many cases instead of Google. So they're trying to catch up. Domino's, man, if I need a pizza delivered, nobody can own pizza. But if I want it delivered, I didn't say it was the best pizza, but if I want it delivered in 30 minutes or less, they created a global brand that put $4 billion, not that money's everything, but it put $4 billion of value in Tom Monahan's pocket, which, by the way, he ended up giving away all to charity. So what is the word or two you own in the minds of your market? By the way to figure it out is go out and talk to your very best customers and ask them, what is it that we really do for you that's different than the competition? Why do you buy from us instead of others? And that's when you begin to get an insight to the answer to this question. Then make that the title of your book.
Yeah, I was going to say, Verne, and you very wisely in 2014, when you released the book Scaling Up, of course, you rebranded your company from Gazelles to Scaling Up around the same time.
Yeah.
You really made everything the focus of job to be done for the core customer.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, scaling up, but not just scaling up valuation.
Yeah. Well, and then as a result, Adam, you've done the same. Yes, you guys can help write and publish books, but there's all kinds of folks that can do that. You've said, look, our job is bigger than that. It's one thing to have a book, but we've got to really help you establish your authority. So what's the title of your book?
The Authority Advantage.
Exactly.
And the title of this podcast, Build Your Authority.
Exactly. And so figuring out that for your industry, for your company, is a critical step. And I know that's what you guys help people figure out as part of their content strategy.
Well, let's connect those two dots, books and authority. For many people, as we've been discussing, books equal authority. And Verne, correct me if I'm wrong, your book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, came out in 2002. Was that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So how did that step of writing that book, putting it out, reaching the masses, how did that propel your authority at the time?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Still, first, it is arduous to write a book. Let's not kid anybody. I mean, you can have it all written and you're not halfway done figuring out who you're going to dedicate it to, getting the testimonials. There's so many I's that got to be dotted and T's crossed. That's why, you guys make that easy. Otherwise, it can be a difficult process. And it's a little bit like giving birth. I have no idea. Your wife, Adam, just gave birth to your second child. So us dudes cannot claim at all that we have any appreciation for that. But it really is about a 9-month gestation process.
Yeah.
And you know what's cool? When you get that box of books and you open it, it's like, there's my baby. There's my baby. So how is it helpful? First, it is the best calling card. You can tell your story in 25,000 to 40,000 words instead of what you can print on a business card. And nobody has business cards anyway. Number two, it's going to sit on, people don't throw them away. You know, it's hard to take a book and throw it in the trash, but it also forces you to get your thoughts organized for you to think through these strategic decisions, questions that we think are important. And then, like I said, once you've got a book, there's this impression that you've got some expertise that others in your industry don't. So all of a sudden you get invited to do breakout sessions. And if you got trade show booths, you want to pass these things out by the dozens. And as we talked about, it's about giving first before receiving. And there's something about Robert Cialdini's, principles of influence, that by me giving something to you of value, a book, there then becomes that sense of reciprocity. And I think that cannot be underestimated. Plus, you know what else we talked about? If nothing else, write it for your kids. Adam, I heard a story this morning I have never heard you tell, even though I've known you for a couple of decades. You got to share that. You probably have on podcasts before, but share it.
So I'll share the story, and then I want to dive into something that you said that I think is very instructive. But to your point, Verne, if you were to write a book for no other reason than your family, that's probably reason enough. So there's an author, very well-known scaling up coach. His name's Andy Bailey. He's a dear friend of Verne, dear friend of mine. And he had written a book with us a few years ago. And he called me one day and he said, Adam, you're never going to believe this story. And I said, Andy, I've heard a lot, but try me. And he said, well, my mother-in-law and I, we've never really seen eye to eye. And I've never really felt that she thought much of me. And he said, the strangest thing happened. When I gave her a copy of my book, she looked at me a little bit different. And then I came to learn that she went to Amazon and bought a dozen copies and handed them out to all of her girlfriends that were in her bridge group.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, this is what the power of a book can do. Now, something that you said, Verne, that I think, is very, very instructive when you were talking about creating the book and talking about then publishing it, you call it tithing. And of course, you're soon to cross over the 1 million copy mark, 1 million copies sold, which, by the way, full disclosure to everybody listening, Verne is in the top 0.00001% of all authors in terms of number of copies sold. So I don't want anybody to think that this is easy to do and likely to happen, because it's very difficult. But one of the things that you said, Verne, is you took a tithing approach. And that is that, of those 1 million copies that you've sold, or close to 1 million copies that you've sold, you've probably given away close to 100,000 copies to seed interest in getting people to buy the book for their employees, for their executives, for their friends, etc. Talk about this idea of tithing when it comes to promoting and selling your book.
Yeah, look, for 99% of the business owners listening to this, or anyone who wants to establish authority, if you really think you're going to make money off the book, get that out of your head now. This is just an inexpensive, again, calling card that establishes that authority. And what it also does is, once you've gotten all your thoughts organized, now you have content that you can share across all the other mediums that we know are important. You and I, Adam, are investors in a technology that we use that can take parts of your book then and create LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn posts, just because of that, we've been able to take my following's now 45,000 on LinkedIn. And we know, particularly business to business,
Yeah,
that's where you build key relationships. It creates Instagram, Twitter posts, and all of that. And the key point is this: you need to be where your market is hanging out. And we even talked about right now, we know video is important.
yeah,
What's good is that once you've got all the words down, now you can repurpose it in many different ways to all of the other, again, mediums that are necessary to establish your authority in the marketplace. And so that's why it's worth it. It's not a money-making venture in and of itself to sell books. And if you can get your first printing, 3,000 copies, you get 3,000 copies in the right hands in your industry. And most worlds are small, as you know, Adam. Most worlds have 500 or 600 key people that make that world go around.
that's right.
You've got that book in the hands of those 400 or 500. And I know that's part of what you guys do, is help people sit down and make that influencer list.
That's right.
And now you're at least, you got your name in front of their name.
Yeah. And what you did with the tithing is, it takes guts, because there's many people that wouldn't want to take the risk and quite frankly, absorb the cost of taking 10% of the print run of their book and giving it away. I mean, I'm constantly talking authors off the ledge of this idea that they've got to pay me $29.99 to get my book. And I said, no. The big picture, if they have your book, if they see you now more as an authority, they're going to do business with you. They're going to bring you in to speak. They're going to bring you in to consult. And that's far more lucrative than $29.99. And so again, I just think that what you shared is very instructive for our listeners, that the more books you give away, the more people are going to actually end up buying your book.
And, one of the other things I advise business owners to do is you want to feature your customers in the book. Like, honestly, everybody wants their name and their company name to show up in print. That's one of the things everybody else wants. And you want to talk about a way to build a bridge with your best customers is to, through a book, get to interview them, get their story, and it is the best testimonials you can have. The key thing I did in Mastering the Rockefeller Habits is I got 100 testimonials I put in the front of the book, because I knew my market they don't care what I say about me. They want to hear what other people like them say about our ability to deliver on our brand promise. And so use this book as an excuse to go out and have somebody interview your customers. I've got Elaine Pofelt who does that for us every week, and create this content and allow you to highlight your customers, make them the heroes of the story instead of you being the hero of the story. That's, again, part of that giving first that's going to come back in spades.
Yeah, and we talk a lot here at Advantage about your content strategy should be you-driven content is about a third. What we call news-driven content should be about a third. And then relationship-driven content should be that final third. And relationship-driven content is really profiling, interviewing, talking about your best customers, right? Profiling their success. And the side benefit that you didn't even mention, Verne, is now, scaling up, I'm going to guess, has 100 different businesses that are mentioned or profiled.
Right.
Now you've got these 100 rabid raving fans that are going to go promote the book for you because they were featured in it.
Yeah, they want to get boxes of books so they can give out and, dog ear the page and say, hey, here's third party. And we know that when you come back to the principles of influence, that third party endorsement is powerful. And now you become the third party endorser of your customers or suppliers or investors or the people in your world. And man, is that a gift you can give your industry.
So Verne, we've talked a lot about books, and obviously the books have been foundational for you in building your authority.
Yeah.
But talk about the other things that you've done. Specifically, let's talk about events. Of course, you've put on huge world-class events yourself where you're the host. You're invited to speak regularly at other world-class events, and I know that the book opens the door for those speaking opportunities. But let's talk for a minute about events. And then I'd love for you to share your approach with your events that you host. You have a very specific rule of who you'll invite to keynote your events.
Yeah, so we love to feature very successful business people. But one of our rules is only if they've written a book. Like the late Sam Zell, who, recently passed, the big real estate mogul out of Chicago. First of all, because they've written a book, they want to get out and promote it. So it's a great time to invite them to your stage, to your company, to your trade show events or whatever. You get to interview them on stage, which I got Sam Zell. But I also know that Sam has been forced to organize his thoughts, to have gathered the stories. And here's the magic of writing a book. It forces you to get your stories right. We're all out telling stories, and some sense we think we know the numbers, we think we know the starting dates, we think we know the right names, but man, when you have to put it down in writing, you got to fact check. And fact checking is powerful. And so we don't invite any CEO to the stage that hasn't written a book.
And the book's opened up so many doors for you to speak. I mean, I think one of the events that you spoke at in Europe was maybe an audience of 20,000 people in a huge, big basketball stadium. But talk about the impact that your speaking has had on further building your business, right? Because the authority creates the opportunity to speak. The speech then engages and connects you with the new audience. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where it just creates a cycle of growth.
Yeah. And by the way, this is a good example that we can say this, but if I have to put it down in writing, I have to say, no, it was 7,300 people in a basketball arena in Amsterdam. At some point it'll be 70,000 will be the story, but
right.
It was 7,300 to be accurate. But again, yes. One of the things you want to do is think through, as we talked with the CEOs this morning in this boot camp at Forbes Books, is, as Jeffrey Moore said, you need to create the 100% solution. And so your book is a door opener that allows you now to have some authority, to have the conversation. And that's when you can we all have a back end, and all the money's really made on the back end.
That's right.
Of what you've put out on the front end. And that's where you have a chance to sell your products and services.
Yeah, I love how you just put that. And I think that is a really neat way to look at it. That every entrepreneur, every CEO, the real money to be made, as you said, is on the back end.
Yeah.
But the job of the CEO, in addition to strategy, is to really be focused on customer acquisition.
Yeah.
And to acquire more customers, you've got to have a better front end. And if you're a thought leader with something to teach, that creates a really attractive front end to power your business, whether it be buying my book and reading it, whether it be speaking at an event, somebody hearing me speak and then say, hey, I need to talk to them, whether it be a podcast, right? Certainly a lot of our authorities have not only written books, but they host their own podcast.
Yes.
They use those podcasts to share insights and wisdom with listeners, which then creates an opportunity for those listeners to come to the back end of, hey, I need you to help me, and so on and so on. So you were very intentional about building out the back end. And I want you to talk about the front end of scaling up, which is the books and the speaking and the courses online that people can buy, but talk also about the back end and how front end and back end connect together.
Yeah. Well, we know that if you're really going to be successful to scale up, and we didn't make that stuff up, it was Jim Collins' model. If you want to go from good to great, you need disciplined people. And that requires coaching. So we now have 293 coaching partners on 6 continents. You need disciplined thought, which really only comes from ongoing executive education. So we have a whole online company university that you and your people can all go through. And then he said through disciplined action. And he emphasized that that's where technology can be an accelerator. So we have a tech platform. And even the fact that we had to, when writing the book, figure out a way to frame that so that we could all tell that same story. What's nice about a book, if nothing else, you want all your employees to read it. That way, they are all telling the same stories in the same order with the same language. And that's why really all the great entrepreneurs that we know have written books. They were as much for the employees as it was the customer. And which brings me, by the way, if anyone gets lost and they just want a simple outline for a book, you take our 1-page vision summary and you have a chapter for each of your 5 or 6 core values. You have a chapter about your purpose. You have a chapter about your big, hairy, audacious goal. And then you have a chapter telling, again, stories in every one of these areas about your 3 brand promises. Right there, you've got a 10-chapter book that allows you to codify what you mean by those 9 or 10 items. And you just created the best onboarding tool and recruiting tool that you could ever have. Just if you're out saying, hey, do you think you might want to work for our company? Take a look at this book and just scan the chapters. And by the way, you will know who you want to hire if one of the first things they say in the interview is, hey, by the way, I read the book. So it works. But look, there are so many uses for getting your thoughts down in writing, whether it's for your children, your mother-in-law, your employees, your industry, or just to get clear about your own thoughts. That's the power. And then from there, it's all your content strategy that builds out of that.
So for our listeners, Verne, scalingup.com, when you go to that website, click on the free growth tools.
Yes.
So something that you did very wisely many, many years ago is you created essentially a proprietary system or a proprietary method, and it's called the growth tools. And it's 8 or 9 pages, and you've got your face tool and your pace tool and your 1-page plan and your vision summary. And you gave it away for free, which most people don't do. They think, this is my IP. You've got to pay me to have access to it. But you took a different approach. You said, I'm going to give it all away for free. What led you to that decision, and what have been the results of that?
Yeah, well, it was really 2 things. It was Herb Keller, the late Herb Keller at Southwest Airlines, who said, look, we're the most studied company in the world. Michael Porter's famous article, What is Strategy?, lays out in detail Southwest Airlines strategy, yet nobody has been really able to copy it because it requires culture in order to do that. I think the other one is the Grateful Dead. You know, I was just at a concert with my daughter over the weekend, and it was all about you can't take video, you can't shoot photos, or any of that kind of stuff. Where the Grateful Dead, and our friend David Meerman Scott, who's on the board here at Forbes Books, you know, the author of 12 books on marketing and fandom and all of that. And they even wrote a book about the marketing lessons of the Grateful Dead. They were early on encouraging people to record their music and spread the word. And the reality is in the entertainment industry, because of Spotify, for instance, and Audible in our world, you can't really make any money off of your content. Just, again, you got to let that go. You got to let that go. And what you want to do is use that to create a fandom so that people come to you instead of you having to come to them. So I think it was a combination of hosting Herb Keller. It was a YPO event out in Colorado, where we had a chance to hear him speak directly about this, and the lessons from the Grateful Dead and they have been, I think the number's right, the most successful band in the world, maybe next to Taylor Swift now, kind of thing. And there you can almost get the music for free, but that then draws people to what generate $1 billion, for her, in terms of folks showing up instead of her having to beg them to come.
Well, the disc jockey on the line could certainly confirm the biggest bands in history. But one thing that I want to add that you said that is so important, and it is our good friend David Meerman Scott that talks about this extensively, of giving it away. And if you don't have a back end, then you're afraid to give it away, because the only thing you have is the front end. And so you're thinking, well, I have to make money on the front end. And what you've done, Verne, and this is how you've built your empire, is no. I'm going to give you everything away for free. I'm here to teach you.
Yeah.
And I don't need to make any money on the front end. But I know that there's a percentage of the people that read the book, they're going to say, I need a coach. Or they're going to say, I really need a software tool where I can measure and monitor execution. Or, I really need to get my executive leaders aligned on this, and I need executive education for my leaders, right?
Yeah.
And you've built out businesses in all of these verticals that are the back end of your business. And so, it's allowed you to be this cheerful teacher versus this recalcitrant, I've got to make money if you want my content. And that, I think, is not only liberating, but it's the enlightened view of authority that most people, I don't think, see.
Yeah. And, I think one of the role models right now, but I haven't checked if he's probably in the process, but is the CEO of NVIDIA. And he's going to the effort to create show up, be interviewed, putting his ideas out there, sharing how they've been able to do what they do. And look, his competition can all tune in to hear how he structures the company, why he's not a fan of one-on-ones and all of that kind of content. And he knows that is critical to building brand in the marketplace. So the good news is the business owners that we're talking to here, you got plenty of back end. So what you've got to do is, let's come back to the fundamental. Becoming an authority does one thing. It makes people call you instead of you having to call them. And that's the measure. That is the measure. Knock on wood. In my business, and I don't think that's a lot of the folks who are listening to this, mine is to get on stages and those kind of things. So far, knock on wood, I don't have an agent. I don't have any speakers bureaus. I still worry as, quote, an entertainer that one day the phone doesn't ring. But now for 42 years, the phone has rang. And I'm booked all the way through 2025. And I thank my lucky stars that I've not had to proactively beg, to be booked. And so and I think having the books and having new content, that's why I've got multiple books. David has multiple books. And even some of the top CEOs we know have multiple books.
Right.
Ben Horowitz. I think a great example is Andreessen Horowitz. This is I think, considered number one most progressive venture capitalist in the world. And I don't think it's by accident that Ben Horowitz has gone out of his way to create some of the best books on what it takes to educate entrepreneurs, which, by the way, fulfills what they need. What's their Moneyball stat? We want first look at the best deals.
Yeah.
And his books, it's all about what they teach entrepreneurs and how to make them CEOs, and they keep them in the CEO role, has put Andreessen Horowitz on the map. And I read their blog posts, and in the pandemic, they were out leading. providing thought leadership during that whole time. And so if a venture capitalist understands the power of teaching in order to get the phone to ring, that's enough evidence for me.
But our friend David Meerman Scott, I think, sums it up best. He says, the reason to have authority is to never make a sales call again.
Yeah, that's right.
And I can't imagine that there's any listener to this podcast right now that's saying, no, I don't want inbound leads. Yeah. I would much rather go chase after people.
Yeah.
Right? The more authority you have, the more your phone's going to ring.
And that's Brian Halligan. He and David Meerman Scott co-wrote a book. That's and right. Brian's first one was inbound marketing. You guys know him as the founder of HubSpot. That's right. And many of us, including our company, use HubSpot as our CRM system. But he got our attention. And by the way, the word he owns is inbound marketing. So enough said. The very guy who's become a multi-billionaire in a very competitive space, the CRM space, figured out the word to own, job to be done, inbound, and it's all a content strategy in order to make that happen. Everyone can do this.
So Verne, let's wrap things up by talking about the legacy of your authority. Because as you mentioned, you're all about paying it forward to folks. You've been doing it for 40 years, but you're not going to be here forever, Verne. As you look great, by the way. I'm not saying you're going to drop dead soon, but you look fantastic. But what do you want the legacy of your authority journey to be?
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? I'm always learning. And last week I was at an event where somebody said, even the word legacy is kind of egotistical, and that maybe it ought to be replaced with the word stewardship. And, the whole reason I got in this business is my dad he and his buddies, they were at Martin Marietta. They were literally rocket engineers on the Titan missile program. They scaled up a very successful company called Higher Electronics. And then they lost it all in the 73 recession. And my dad never recovered. He became an alcoholic. It broke up the family. It just became a mess. And I realized, man, if I can keep even one entrepreneur to, from going through what my dad and my family suffered, because growth sucks cash, and they literally ran out of cash when things got tough, then you know what? I can say that's my legacy, but it's my willingness to continue to give long after I'm gone, hopefully, to the very purpose of why I got in this business in the first place, really to honor the journey that my dad went through and to kind of keep that from happening to anybody else. So I want to continue to be a good steward to entrepreneurs moving forward. And that's why I'm excited about EO. I think it's going to continue, hopefully, to serve the market long after I'm gone, and our work as well.
Well, I will say, as an entrepreneur that scaled a business from scratch into a significant 8-figure business, I could not have done it without scaling up and without having the blueprint and the framework to follow. And I know I am just one of tens of thousands, if not more, examples of that. So, Verne, your stewardship has been significant in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I think it was you that said during the COVID pandemic that entrepreneurs are our first responders. Yeah. And that always stuck with me, because we entrepreneurs have an important role to play in freedom, in prosperity, in liberalizing democracy worldwide, because a growing business is an incoming tide that lifts all boats.
That's right.
And when a business is growing, everybody associated with that business is made better off.
That's right.
And you have helped create an incredible impact there with tens of thousands of businesses that have grown, that have prospered, and have made millions of lives better off as a result of you. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to say, you guys are all smarter than me, but legacy sounds cooler than stewardship. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to hang on. I mean, I feel legacy is a cooler word, but if our folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to start?
scalingup.com. And as Adam mentioned, right next to the picture of all the books are a whole bunch of free resources, a free mini course, free chapters from the book. You don't even have to buy the book, plus a link to the growth tools and others. And then my email is very easy, verne@scalingup.com. And I really do respond to those. I get help with my EA on that as well. So that's how you get a hold of me.
Awesome. Verne, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And Adam, that's going to wrap up another episode of Build Your Authority. We've been talking about books a lot on this show. Next episode, we're going to do a deep dive into building your authority with books with one of our in-house experts. So give us a little thumbnail about what we can get into next week on Build Your Authority and writing books.
Yeah, so the 4 P's of marketing, one of them is place. Now, some people would call it distribution, but where your product shows up makes a difference. And so on our next episode, we're going to have KJ Grow, who is our Senior Director of Distribution for Forbes Books and Advantage Books. She's going to talk about how to get your book in the right places to help you build your authority, help you build the brand of your book, and ultimately, hey, we're all interested in selling copies if we can. So we're going to talk about how distribution can help you sell a few more copies too.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. I'll see you next time.
Look forward to it.